Okay, tonight I would like to speak about the interpersonal relationships in Judaism. There are in fact in the Torah many mitzvot which concern interpersonal relationships. Whether this would be to judge other people favourably, or not to hate, or not to take revenge or bear a grudge, or to save someone who's having a hard time, or whether it would be not to trip up somebody, a blind man with a stumbling block, which really means trick anyone into doing something that's not so good for him to be doing right now. These are all examples of mitzvot. You're not allowed to hit, you're not allowed to curse, you're not allowed to cause strife, machloket. You're supposed to greet people with shalom when you meet them. You're not allowed to hurt people with words or embarrass people, certainly not in public, and so on, how to rebuke or reproof people, not to envy, coveting other people's possessions or anything else they have, not lying, many negative things not to do. There's also the V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, v'halachta bidrachav, many positive commandments, visiting the sick and taking care of, attending to all their needs, or attending to the deceased, consoling the mourners, chatan v'kala, helping them out, hospitality. There's also things like lashon hara, kibud horim, honoring one's parents. There are many mitzvahs. The Midrash relates to a king who asked to have a house built at sea. So they took two great big ships and tied them together, strong knots, strong ropes, and they started building. They built a whole palace at sea. Sounds like a wonderful idea. Now, if these ropes are too weak and these knots are not tight enough and start to get untied, so then the ships are going to come apart, the whole palace is going to fall down. Hashem Yisbarach wanted Klal Yisrael to be unified. Therefore, He gave us many mitzvahs, because when we're at unity, we will have the Shekhinah, the divine presence within us. It's almost as if He said, when you're all together like one, I'll be there, and if not, I won't be there. In a few weeks, we're going to be saying at the Seder night, Elu hevionu lifnei har Sinai v'lo nosan es haTorah dayenu. Had HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought us to Har Sinai and not given us the Torah, that would be good enough for us. What is good enough about that? Yeah, we'll turn up there. Richard will turn up there with his 7 mitzvot, and George will turn up there with his 7 mitzvot, and they'll both go home with the same 7 mitzvot they came, and that's fine, that's enough for us. What's so good about that? Well, what's good about that is when we were in front of Mount Sinai, it says in the Torah, Vayichan ha'am keneged ha'har. So the sages ask, what's this Vayichan? You need Vayichan is one person. You need a plural. Vayichanu ha'am keneged ha'har. What's going on? Why Vayichan? So the sages say they were by the mountain, Ki'ish echad belev echad. They were like one man with one heart. Controlling a crowd of 600,000, grown men, army age, apart from everybody else, is not so easy. There was no shoving and pushing. Everybody was making sure there's enough space for everybody else, and they were fine with what was the space that was allotted to them. All these mitzvot were so strong, just naturally, everybody caring for everybody else, that there was absolute unity. And when there's unity, Hashem rests His Shekhinah in that place. We are 600,000 components of one neshama. And these mitzvot is what holds us together and brings us together and brings the Shekhinah into Klal Yisrael. Out of the 613 mitzvot, many of them we don't have nowadays. We don't have a king and temple. There are some mitzvot of Eretz Yisrael, but not all of them. We have lulav, we have shofar. Quite a lot of the mitzvot that remain are the mitzvot between man and his friend. Mitzvot bein adam lechaveira. And these mitzvot are given to us. You know, it's not easy. When you hate someone, you hate them. But Hashem said, don't hate them. Revenge is sweeter than honey. But Hashem said, don't do it. There's something more important. Whatever happened to you, even at the hands of another human being, is from me. It's not worth taking revenge over another Jew for such a thing. When we learn to restrain, retain, not to burst out at people, not to curse when we're angry, not to hit, so then we are perfecting our characters. Our whole personality becomes different. You know, if you learn martial arts, so it's one thing watching a few kicks and punches and blocks and whatever. It's another thing being able to do it. I have a Talmud that he since he was 9 years old, a few years, he did an hour an evening. In the beginning, his body used to be full of bruises. But if someone woke him up in the middle of his sleep and he felt threatened, on the spur of the moment, he could block in a way that he could break someone's bones. He was once at a demonstration, and a few policemen went for him with their truncheons, and he just waved them off. Nothing happened to him. He didn't counterattack because he was taught not to attract attention. It becomes second nature. Well, that's in physical might. Here we're talking about building people, building personalities, having correct character traits. We're born imperfect. People are born very selfish. My mum, my dad, my house, my school, everything's mine. We grow a little bit and we find out there are other people in the world. Well, we've got to get along with them. And yeah, this is the real stuff. Do you know the Chafetz Chaim, famous, he had a granddaughter, he had a grandson in Israel who was about 2 when the Chafetz Chaim passed away. And he was a big Rosh Yeshiva. And he heard his first cousin arrived in Israel. She was not religious. From the Chafetz Chaim's first wife, many of them left Judaism, became communists, or were killed by the Nazis or the communists. So this girl had left the house at 17. And she asked, he went to visit his cousin. She was about 90. He asked her, do you remember anything about our grandfather? And she said, yeah, let me tell you. I left at 17, and I went off to university. I came back a year later, and I asked him in Yiddish, grandfather, why are you sitting in the dark? Out there, we're in an enlightened world. We have airplanes that can fly in the sky. We have bombs that can blow things up. And he looked at her, and he said to her, yes, soon they're going to have rockets that can get to the moon. I know from my family, even in the 40s, people still did not believe that man will ever get to the moon. He said, yes, they'll have airplanes that can get all the way to the moon. They will have bombs that could blow up the whole world. They're building a lot of stuff out there. But here in Judaism, we are building people. It's quite a deep thing. Here in Judaism, we are building people. Most of the 613 mitzvot that we have nowadays, possibly the majority of them that come to regular people, which are daily, not like shofar once a year or lulav once a year and only on men, which are daily and on men and women, and we have to educate our children with them, are the mitzvot of between man and his friend. And we're supposed to get so used to doing them that they become second nature. Yeah, like a martial arts expert, that it becomes second nature. That's what we're supposed to be doing. This is V'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha. This is the V'halachta b'drachav. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to emulate him. These are mitzvot that are actual obligations. This is not extra piety or being extra nice or with beyond the letter of the law. They are real mitzvot. Let's take an example. B'tzedek tishbot amitecha. Judging favourably. Judging favourably, you've seen someone doing something. It looks suspicious. Okay, if he's a very righteous person in this field, let's say he's very particular about Shabbat, or about, let's say he's very particular about what he eats, that it should always be kosher, and you see him in the corner of a non-kosher restaurant, like Munch Crunch, wiping his lips, looking around, nobody's seeing him, somewhere out of town. Okay, should you be suspecting him? If he's a very righteous person, no. Maybe he brought some food from home and he just ordered a cold drink to be able to use the place because he doesn't want to eat in the street. And if you really see him eating that trefa hamburger, well, maybe he nearly had a heart attack. Maybe he thought the non-smoking sign was the Hechsher certificate. I don't know. If he's a righteous person and he never ever does this, you're supposed to really judge him favorably. If he's a wicked person and he usually doesn't eat kosher, you may suspect him, no problem with that. If he is like usually good and sometimes falls, so then it depends. If it's very suspicious, then you are allowed to suspect him, the letter of the law. It would be more reputable to not suspect him, but the letter of the law, you may suspect him. If it doesn't look suspicious at all, then you have to judge him favorably. Even if it's balanced, half-half, you have to judge him favorably. That is the mitzvah. Let's work out, if you don't know who this person is, you don't have to judge anything because you don't know him. It would be reputable to judge him favorably, but you don't have to. Okay, so how hard is this for us? And is it for our good or what? Well, how hard is it? It's quite easy. If you judge him favorably, then you walk off happy man. If you suspect, you walk off pained. What did Hashem ask us to do in this mitzvah? He just asked us to think about other human beings by what probably happened. It probably was, if he's a righteous man, it probably was some kind of mistake, or he's done teshuvah by now. And if it was a wicked man, you're allowed to suspect him. And if it's a half-half, it depends on how it looks. If it looks bad, so then it's probably bad. He sometimes falls. And the letter of the law, you may suspect. If it looks good, why are you suspecting? It probably is good. He doesn't usually fall. And if it's balanced, so that judge him favorably. He's probably not falling. He doesn't usually. So Hashem just asked us to judge the situation by what probably happened. So let's do that. If you go around suspecting people on left and on right, you're the one who doesn't sleep at night. Don't take revenge. We said revenge is sweeter than honey, but still, don't do it. God wanted us to be beyond, to break human nature in certain ways, because taking revenge will only blow things up. So what about bearing a grudge? I won't actually take revenge. No, you're not allowed to do that either. You lent him a hammer yesterday. Yesterday you asked him for a hammer, and he's your neighbor, and he said, no, I'm not lending you a hammer. Today he knocked on your door, can I have a screwdriver? What, the audacity? Why didn't you lend me a hammer yesterday? I'm not giving you a screwdriver. That's taking revenge. What about, yes, I'll give you a screwdriver. I'm not like you. You wouldn't give me the hammer yesterday. I'll give you the screwdriver. That is bearing a grudge. Even if you don't say the words, you're bearing a grudge. You have to willingly give it to him. The truth is, had you judged him favorably, it would have all been okay. But maybe he had a reason. Maybe the hammer was by a different neighbor. Maybe he was in the middle of using it. Oh, who knows? Okay, so is it so hard? Let's take a mitzvah like embarrassing people in public. The sages say that somebody who is on a regular basis embarrasses people in public, he forfeits his whole portion in the world to come. This whole world was created from spirituality. God said 10 expressions, 10 speeches, and from each expression, something was created. The whole world was created from, do we know what God's speaking is? Something very spiritual, something non-tangible. We can't see it. we believe, that's what the sages said, there's no other way that this world could have been created. Can all the governments in the world together just paint a picture like the sky, just over this neighborhood? No. So someone has to have made the world. So it was God with 10 expressions, 10 sentences, 10 sayings. Okay, so the world came originally from something very, very spiritual. And we're also on the way to a world that's very spiritual. The world to come, Ein leiros azulos chelekim. The prophets say that a human being can't perceive it. Even a prophet cannot perceive the world to come. The eternal bliss is too great. It is a spiritual eternal bliss, and it is too great for even a prophet to perceive. Only God can see it. When we get there, we'll get it. Okay, so we came from a spiritual realms, and we're on the way to spiritual realms, but right now we've stopped off in a material world. And God has asked us to do my mitzvahs, use these material world, use the lulav and the etrog for this mitzvah. Use this wood and these stones to build this Bet HaKnesset, Bet HaMidrash. Use the world for holy things. He also said, use your body and soul to hallow it, to do my will. Break yourself and do not take revenge. Well, don't embarrass people in public, however tempting it may be. The Gemara says that Tamar, of course, I'm sure the audience know the story, but we'll say it in short for the rest of the audience that may not know it. Yehuda had 3 sons. The first one married Tamar and died. The second one married Tamar and died. In those days, there was Yibum, marry your brother's wife, so that he should have something to remember. Bear a child, and there'll be a remembrance for your brother. And Yehuda was scared to give her to his 3rd son, because he was scared he would die too. So he told her, go back to your father's house and wait until he grows up. And that meant I'll try in American, which meant forget about it. And Tamar very much wanted this yibum. It was her right. And before the Torah was given, her father could do it too. She was a very tsanua woman, very modest. She dressed very well. So therefore, her father-in-law didn't even recognize her because she was so modest when she hung around his house, and he was also modest and didn't gaze at her. So she heard he was on his way somewhere, so she sat at the crossroads as if she's one of those women that sell herself. And Yehuda had tremendous Ruach HaKodesh that he has to bring into the world, the Moshiach, from this woman. And before the Torah was given, there wasn't Kiddushin, Chuppah, and you could even have a concubine, and you could also use one of these women so long as you pay. That's how Maimonides explains it. So he went to her, and he did what he did, and she took a collateral, his coat, his stick, his signet ring, and then you'll send me a sheep for my when you have. And in the meantime, I'll hold these things by me. And Yehuda sends his partner, and he's looking all over for this woman, and the collateral just stays by her. And then a couple of months later, she's looking pregnant, and she was the daughter of the Kohen, Shem. So they have to take her out and burn her. And Yehuda is sitting on the panel of the Beth Din. And yes, the daughter of a Kohen who is an adulterer has to be burned. So he says, take her out and burn her. And they're setting her alight, and she sends him this bag with a coat and the stick and the signet ring. And she says, the owner of these is the one I am pregnant from. And Yehuda is sitting on the top table over there, and she's being set alight. And he takes a look at them, and he gets up and he says, Tzodko mimeni. She's right. This is from me, because she tricked me into doing the yibum. She's okay. I'm not so good. Okay, they didn't set her alight, and she gave birth to twins, and this is where the Mashiach came from, David HaMelech, and this is Yehuda who can take responsibility for his actions. The question arises, why did Tamar do this? Why did she let herself be set alight? If he wouldn't admit, the Gemara said she didn't want to embarrass him in public. If he wants to do it to himself, that's fine with me. I'm not doing it. They're going to set me alight, so I'll die. The Gemara says it should be easier for a Jew to allow himself to be thrown into a burning furnace than to embarrass his fellow in public. Do you know why? The furnace will burn him up in a few minutes. But if he embarrasses his fellow in public, he's going to have to carry around that embarrassment with him until the end of his days. So the earlier commentaries ask, there are only 3 mitzvot that a person has to be willing to give up his life for: adultery, idol worship, and murder. What's this one? So the Tosafists answer, this is a 4th one, but because it's not clear in the Torah, therefore it's not mentioned as in the group of 3 in the other places in the Gemara. Rabbeinu Yonah Migarondi answers that it's part of murder. It's not only the actual idol worship that a person can be killed for by the Beth Din in those days, that is, a person has to give up his life for, to show how much he loves God and he believes in God and trusts God. Not only real idol worship, even the accessories of idol worship. So too says Rabbeinu Yonah from Gerondi, also the accessories of murder. Murder, you slit his throat and he dies. You drain his blood. Here too, when you embarrass someone in public and he pales and he blushes, you are draining his blood. It's an accessory of murder. There are also earlier commentaries who say that this is not necessarily obligatory to everybody. This is just if somebody wishes, he may do this. He may throw himself into a burning furnace rather than have himself embarrass somebody else. However, there is one of the later commentaries, the Binyan Tzion from about 200 years ago, that he says that even if a child, you're not to embarrass a child in public either. Sometimes he's embarrassed himself in front of the family or the class or whatever it is, but you're not supposed to, or in some, if you embarrass him, then it will, that was how they used to do things years ago, hit and embarrass, so you're doing it for a positive purpose, but otherwise you're not even allowed to embarrass a child. So if someone will hold a pistol at your temple and tell you, embarrass this child in front of 3 people, even if he's sleeping right now, but when he wakes up, he'll be embarrassed, and he's big enough to be embarrassed about this, you're supposed to let him shoot and not embarrass him. Not everybody actually paskins like this, but the Binyan Tzion, the Aruch LaNer, does. Okay, that's how serious it is. So Yosef HaTzadik is in Mitzrayim, one of the 12 tribes, and he's troubled his brothers back and forth twice, and he's threatening them, and he's putting them in and out of prison and whatnot. And they got to the final crunch. And Yehuda draws near to Yosef. And when Yehuda gets angry, he has like iron hair on his chest that pokes out from his clothing. And when he screams, the walls of Mitzrayim fall from the vibration. And Paroi tumbles down the 70 steps of his throne. And all the pregnant women miscarry. From the earthquake, the fear of Yehuda's scream. He takes a huge rock, he throws it up, and it goes high, high, high into heaven. Very heavy rock. It comes down, he catches it in his hands, and he crushes it between his hands to powder. And he walks towards Yosef, and he says, I'm going to deal with you and Paroi in the same way. They didn't have bullets in those days. They had a lot of mighty bodyguards. But this is what was going on. And Yosef is like a little bit shaken. He's not such a weakling. He also kicks a sapphire block and it breaks in 2. Sapphire is very strong. You put it on your anvil and you bash it with your hammer. It'll break the hammer and the anvil. And Yosef can smash that. Okay. And Yehud is getting very angry. Naftali ayala shalucha. Naphtali, who's the fast runner, the sprinter, has been out there to check it out. And he says there are 12 cities over here. And Yehuda says, 3 on me, and you guys take 1 each. They're talking Hebrew. They don't know Yosef can hear and understand, but he is understanding. Shimon and Levi had once done away with the whole town Shechem. They're ready for it. They're all ready. And Yosef HaTzadik says, Hoitziu kol ish me'olai. I can't stand the embarrassment of my brothers. Everybody must leave. All the non-Jewish bodyguards must leave. V'lo omad shom ish. Nobody was there, only the 12 tribes. And Yosef turns to his 11 brothers and he says, Ani Yosef. What are you talking about? Nafshoy kashura benafshoy. If I take Binyamin, then your dad's going to die. Ani Yosef. Asher mochartem oisi heina. Ha'oidovi chai. You sold me here 22 years ago. Is dad still alive? They could not answer him. Nivhalu miponov. The sages say they died. And they had to have tchiyat hametim to revive them. Tochacha, rebuke, reproof. It's very tough. From where did Yosef take the liberty to throw everyone out and remain with no protection whatsoever with these mighty, desperate people who had to get him out of the way? The same thing. It has to be easier for a Jew to throw himself into a burning furnace than embarrass one of his brethren in public. These are examples of you should reproof your brother. However, don't embarrass him when you're doing that. This is what God demands of us, and this is what we're supposed to be. And we're supposed to become perfect. This is supposed to be part of our DNA, and we're supposed to become as perfect people as possible. We grow slowly. We build people. We don't build bombs to blow up the world and rockets to go to the moon from taxpayers' money. All right. Isn't it going to be such a marvelous world where nobody hates each other, everybody judges each other favorably, nobody takes revenge, nobody bears grudges, there's no machloket, nobody's hitting, nobody's cursing, everybody's taking such good care of everybody else and being so concerned and sensitive to their needs and wants and pleasures and desires, even more than his own? That would be wonderful. The Rambam says in the laws of Chanukah that if there's not enough money to pay for Hanukkah lights and Shabbat lights, so Shabbat lights come first. Mishum shlom beto. That's what helps to have shalom in the house. And the Rambam says, the whole Torah, derachea darkei noam v'chol netivotea shalom. All the pathways of the Torah are supposed to bring to shalom. Shalom means complete, perfect, complete, one unit. The whole Torah is around that. A sotah, when there is problems of shlom bayit between a husband and wife and he suspects her and they bring her to the Beis HaMikdash, they will rub out Hashem's name. That's a terrible desecration. You're not allowed to rub out Hashem's name in order to bring peace between a husband and wife. There was once a yeshiva boy going down the main road in London, a main road in London, and a thug came by and snatched his hat and ran off with it. The goyim think that's very funny. Now he's in a bit of a predicament because some yeshiva boys would be quite embarrassed to go to the synagogue on Shabbos morning without a hat. A car sped by, ground to a halt right next to this thug. 3 guys jumped out of the car. They grabbed the thug. They beat the living daylight out of him. They took the hat and they gave it back to the yeshiva boy. And the yeshiva boy said, I've got a question to ask you, but I don't want to hurt your feelings, so maybe I won't ask it. So they said, no, ask it. So he said, no, I can't do that to you. Thank you very much for the hat. So they were curious enough. Rabbi, tell us what your question is. So he said, you guys don't even keep Shabbos. You drive on Shabbos. You don't go to shul. You don't wear a hat. Why did you do me this favor? They said to him, Rabbi, if we don't stick together, we're lost. The Rothschild shield, the family emblem, has on it 5 arrows. He had 5 sons who were bankers in 5 different countries. When he was on his deathbed, he took 10 arrows. He gave out 1 arrow to each son. He said, break that. And they broke it. He then took the 5 arrows himself, and he, holding them all together, he tried to break it. He saw he couldn't. He said, now you try. Let's see if one of you can break this. And none of them could break the 5 arrows together. He said to them, my dear children, if you stick together, nobody will be able to break you. It's when there's cracks between you that the enemy can get inside. Rabbeinu Yonah says, when you give tzedakah, charity, you have to really pity the person. Because if you don't pity him, you may have performed 7 or 8 mitzvot, but you've done 1 aveirah. You should not strengthen your heart when you give charity. And even if you did have pity on him at the time and feel his problem, if you didn't give it with an easy heart, you have transgressed. A Jew is not just like a lulav in your hands. A Jew, you have to pity him. You have to feel for him. You have to want to be good to him. This is not some kind of mathematical equation. Purim's coming up. Matanot le'evyonim. We don't just look, where can I get the best evyon? I found an evyon. I won't tell anyone about it because I want to hold on to it till the end of Purim. I don't want other people to get hold of him. Maybe we can keep him an evyon till next Purim. No. He is not a lulav, the evyon. The evyon is a Jew that deserves your respect, and he deserves your pity. How would it look if it was the other way around? God created the world and he owns the world. He has all the gold and silver and he can decide who's who. Maybe next year it'll be the other way around. Who knows? Rav Shach, he also had very strong, stringent ideas about certain things. So there was once a meeting and somebody piped up and said that Rav Shach is not fond of a certain kind of Jew, not fond enough. So there was one rabbi over there who said, I learned in the yeshiva of Rav Shach in the Ponevezh. And I was there one day. Let me tell you a story. When he had to go for an operation on his leg, and he was too old for an anesthetic, so I held his hand during that operation. And he held my hand so tightly, like Samson the Mighty, it was impossible to believe someone in his 90s could have such a tight grip. He almost broke my bones, but he didn't let a peep out of his mouth. About 30 years was Milchemet Shlom HaGalil, about 32 years ago. And this rabbi said, I was in the office in Ponevezh when Rav Shach came in, exhausted after giving a shiur. And somebody came into the office and said, everybody out. They brought Rav Shach a chair. I was like an American, fun lover, so I hid behind a piece of furniture. They brought him a glass of water. They sat him down on a chair. And they told him, Rabbi, 3 boys have been killed today in Lebanon. They're kibbutznikim who eat rabbits on Yom Kippur. But 3 Yiddish boys have been killed today in Lebanon. Rav Shach fell from the chair and he broke out into uncontrollable crying for 20 minutes. His own operation, he didn't let out a peep. He was an old man. Another Jew's problem, the mothers, they're going to be without their children. Maybe the wives, maybe they're orphans. He broke out into uncontrollable crying for 20 minutes for other Jews' pain. This is how we are all supposed to be. This is how we're all supposed to be. We're not like the Achashverosh, who can ruin 1,000 women's lives every night, another one, and blow these huge feasts and whatnot, all on other people's account. No, it's like David HaMelech. Tzedakah u'mishpat. David HaMelech, he was a judge. When the poor man lost, was wrong. You're not allowed to sway the din because he's poor. So he lost, but at the end of the judgment, David HaMelech would open his wallet and give the poor man enough money to pay his loss. Okay, all I could say is that it should be the will before God, that it should be easy for us to keep all of these mitzvot, and the Shekhinah should rest between us. We should get to absolute unity between us, and the Shekhinah should come down and rest on us, and we should merit the building of the Bet HaMikdash and the Shekhinah between us. B'mheira v'yameinu amen. Thank you.